The rain was coming down hard on Interstate 25, just outside Albuquerque, when Officer Michael Torres saw the black Bentley pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking through the storm. What happened next would become a lesson in humility, courage, and the true meaning of protecting and serving that neither man would ever forget. When a rookie cop decided to flex his authority on what he thought was just another rich guy with a fancy car, he had no idea he was about to encounter the most dangerous fighter on the planet. But more importantly, he had no idea he was about to learn what real strength looks like. Before I tell you this incredible story that will completely change how you see power and authority, hit that like button and subscribe, because what Jon Jones did that night proves that sometimes the greatest warriors win without throwing a single punch. Officer Michael Torres had been on the force for exactly 93 days. Fresh out of the academy, full of ambition and eager to prove himself, he patrolled the night shift with the enthusiasm only a rookie could maintain. At 24 years old, he thought he'd seen it all in training. The videos, the scenarios, the warnings about staying alert and maintaining control. But nothing in the academy had prepared him for what would happen on that rain-soaked Tuesday night in November 2023. The weather was brutal, the kind of New Mexico storm that turned highways into rivers and visibility into a suggestion. Michael had already responded to 2 minor accidents, helped a stranded family change a tire, and was looking forward to the end of his shift when he spotted the Bentley. Even through the rain, the car stood out. Matte black, custom rims, the kind of vehicle that costs more than most people's houses. It was pulled over haphazardly, half on the shoulder, half in the emergency lane, hazards blinking but no signs of damage. Michael's training kicked in immediately. Expensive car, poor parking job late at night. His mind ran through the possibilities. DUI, drug deal, rich kid thinking laws didn't apply to them. He called it in to dispatch, requesting backup as a precaution, then pulled his patrol car behind the Bentley, angling it to protect against traffic. Inside the Bentley, Jon Jones was dealing with a very different kind of emergency. Jessie Moses was in the passenger seat, her face pale, her hands clutched around her stomach. They'd been driving back from Santa Fe, where Jon had been speaking at a youth detention center, sharing his story of redemption with kids who reminded him of his younger self. The sudden onset of severe stomach pain had forced Jon to pull over, quickly, more concerned about his fiancée than proper parking protocol. "Baby, talk to me," Jon said, his massive hand gently rubbing her back. "Is it the same pain as before?" Jessie nodded weakly. She'd been having recurring stomach issues, something her doctor was still trying to diagnose. The pain usually passed, but when it hit, it was debilitating. Jon was reaching for his phone to call Jessie's doctor when he saw the police lights in his rearview mirror. His jaw tightened involuntarily, not from fear or anger, but from muscle memory. For years, police lights had meant trouble, had meant another mistake, another headline, another disappointment. But that was the old Jon. The new Jon took a deep breath, whispered to Jessie that everything would be fine, and prepared to explain the situation calmly. He rolled down his window before the officer even approached, wanting to appear cooperative and non-threatening. Officer Torres approached the vehicle with textbook caution, hand resting on his weapon, flashlight cutting through the rain, every sense on high alert. The tinted windows made it impossible to see inside until he was right at the driver's side. When he saw the massive figure behind the wheel, his grip instinctively tightened. The driver was huge, easily the biggest person Michael had ever encountered during a traffic stop. Tattoos visible on his arms, shaved head, the kind of presence that seemed to fill the entire vehicle. "License and registration," Michael said, his voice carrying more authority than he felt. He'd learned in the academy that showing any weakness, especially as a rookie, could escalate situations quickly. Jon moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands visible. "Officer, my fiancée is having severe stomach pain. I pulled over because she needed me to stop driving. I apologize for the poor parking job." His voice was calm, respectful, but Michael had already made up his mind about what kind of stop this was. Rich guy, expensive car, probably drunk and making excuses. He'd seen this movie before. "License and registration," he repeated, more forcefully this time. "And I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." From the passenger seat, Jessie let out a small moan of pain. John's eyes flicked to her with concern before returning to the officer. "Sir, I understand you're doing your job, but my fiancée really needs—" "Sir, I'm not going to ask you again. Step out of the vehicle now." Michael's hand moved from resting on his weapon to gripping it, though he didn't draw. The rain was soaking through his uniform, adrenaline making his heart race. This was it, he thought, his first real confrontation. He needed to maintain control. John closed his eyes for a moment. 5 years ago, this would have gone very differently. 5 years ago, he would have erupted, would have let pride and ego turn this into a confrontation that would end with him in handcuffs or worse. But 5 years of therapy, of growth, of learning what really mattered, had changed him. When he opened his eyes, they were calm. "Officer Torres," he said, reading the nameplate despite the rain, "I'm going to comply with everything you ask. But please, can we call an ambulance for my fiancée first? She's in real pain." The use of his name caught Michael off guard. Suspects usually didn't bother to read nameplates, especially not in the rain, but he'd been trained not to let anything break his focus. "Step out of the vehicle, sir. Your passenger will be fine." John looked at Jessie one more time. "Baby, I'll be right here. Everything's going to be okay." Then, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible, he opened the door and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit him immediately, soaking through his t-shirt, but John didn't react. He stood there, all 6'4" and 240 pounds of him, hands visible, posture non-threatening despite his intimidating size. Michael had to look up to meet his eyes, and something about that height difference combined with the driver's calm demeanor made him even more nervous. "Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle," Michael ordered. John complied without protest, spreading his legs and placing his palms flat on the wet roof of the Bentley. As Michael began to pat him down, John spoke quietly. "Officer Torres, I want you to know I respect what you're doing. I know you're just trying to do your job and keep people safe. I've made a lot of mistakes in my past, had a lot of run-ins with police officers who were just trying to do the same thing. I don't hold any of this against you." The words were so unexpected, so different from what Michael usually heard during stops, that he almost paused. But training kicked in, and he continued his search, finding only a wallet, phone, and car keys. "Have you been drinking tonight?" Michael asked, though he couldn't smell any alcohol. "No, sir, I've been sober for 3 years. I was speaking at a youth detention center in Santa Fe about the dangers of addiction and the importance of making better choices. We were driving home when my fiancée got sick." Michael pulled out John's wallet, flipping it open to check the ID. The name didn't register immediately in the rain and darkness. Jonathan Jones. The address was in one of Albuquerque's nicer neighborhoods, which fit with the expensive car. "Mr. Jones, I'm going to need you to—" A sound from inside the car cut him off. Jessie was crying now, soft sobs mixing with obvious pain. John's muscles tensed, not with aggression but with concern. "Officer, please. I know you think I'm some rich asshole trying to get out of trouble, but I swear to you, she needs help. You can arrest me, give me whatever tickets you want, but please call an ambulance for her first." Something in John's voice, the raw concern and willingness to accept consequences just to get help for his passenger, made Michael hesitate. He looked through the rain-streaked window at the woman inside, saw her doubled over, face contorted in pain. For the first time since the stop began, doubt crept in. What if this wasn't what he thought it was? "Stay here," Michael ordered, then walked around to the passenger side. He knocked on the window and Jessie, with obvious effort, rolled it down. "Ma'am, are you okay?" "Please," Jessie gasped between waves of pain. "It's not his fault. I have a chronic condition. He was just trying to get me somewhere safe to pull over." Her eyes were genuine, pained without any of the signs Michael had been trained to look for in impaired individuals. No dilated pupils, no slurred speech, just real distress. Michael's certainty began to crumble. He keyed his radio, calling for an ambulance to their location, then walked back to where John still stood against the car, rain streaming down his face. "The ambulance is on the way," Michael said, some of the edge gone from his voice. But I still need to complete this stop. Have you had any incidents with law enforcement before? Jon actually laughed, a short, rueful sound. Officer Torres, if you run my name, you're going to find a lot of incidents. DUIs, fleeing the scene of an accident, domestic disputes. You're going to see a man who used to be everything wrong with people who think they're above the law. He turned his head slightly to look at the young officer. But you're also going to see that all of that was years ago, before I got help, before I became the man my family deserved. Michael pulled out his phone to run the name. And that's when the backup unit arrived. Officer Patricia Sanchez, a 15-year veteran, stepped out of her patrol car and immediately recognized the scene. Rookie officer, high-end vehicle, tense situation. But as she approached, her eyes widened. Even in the rain, even from a distance, she recognized the figure standing against the Bentley. "Torres," she called out, jogging over. "What's the situation?" Michael quickly briefed her, but Patricia was barely listening. She was staring at Jon Jones, the Jon Jones, standing there in the rain, completely compliant while her rookie partner ran his information. "Mike," she said quietly, pulling him aside. "Do you know who that is?" Michael shook his head, confused by her tone. Patricia couldn't believe it. "That's Jon Jones, UFC heavyweight champion, the most dangerous fighter on the planet. And he's just standing there, letting you pat him down, calling you sir, being more respectful than most people we stop." The information hit Michael like the rain, cold and shocking. He looked back at Jon, seeing him differently now. This man could have easily overpowered him, could have turned this stop into a nightmare, but instead had chosen complete cooperation. The ambulance arrived then, paramedics rushing to help Jesse. Jon immediately moved toward the vehicle, but stopped. Looking back at Officer Torres, "May I go with her? She's scared of hospitals, needs someone with her." His voice carried no resentment, no anger about being detained while his fiancée was in pain. Just concern for her well-being. Michael nodded quickly. "Yes, of course, I'm sorry about—" Jon held up a hand, stopping the apology. "You were doing your job, Officer Torres. Nothing to apologize for." But Michael couldn't let it go. As the paramedics prepared Jesse for transport, he approached Jon. "Mr. Jones, I need to apologize. I made assumptions based on your car, your size, the situation. I treated you like a criminal instead of someone who needed help. That's not the kind of cop I want to be." Jon turned from watching the paramedics to face the young officer fully. What he said next would stay with Michael Torres for the rest of his career. "Brother, let me tell you something," Jon said, rain still streaming down his face. "You know what I saw tonight? I saw a young officer, alone in a storm, approaching a vehicle with someone my size in it, and still doing his job. You know how much courage that takes? I fight trained killers for a living, and I'm not sure I'd have the balls to do what you do every night," he continued. "You made assumptions. So what? Everyone does. You know how many people assume things about me based on my past? The difference is what you do when you realize you're wrong. You called that ambulance. You're apologizing now. That's growth, brother. That's character." Michael felt something shift inside him. Here was this man, this champion, this person he'd treated with suspicion and borderline disrespect, showing him more grace than he deserved. But I should have listened. I should have seen the situation for what it was. Jon shook his head. "You want to know something? 5 years ago, if a cop had stopped me like this, I would have given you every reason to arrest me. I would have been belligerent, aggressive, probably drunk or high. You treating me with suspicion? That's not on you, that's on the reputation I built for myself." The paramedics had Jessie on a stretcher now, moving her toward the ambulance. Jon needed to go, but he wasn't finished. "Officer Torres, you're what, few months on the job?" Michael nodded. 93 days. 93 days, Jon repeated. "You know what you need to remember. Every stop you make, every person you encounter, they're fighting battles you can't see. My woman in there, she's been dealing with chronic pain for 2 years, never complains, never uses it as an excuse, just handles it with grace. Me, I'm fighting to stay the man my family needs me to be instead of the man I used to be." He stepped closer, and despite the height difference, it didn't feel intimidating. It felt like a mentor talking to a student. Your job isn't just about catching bad guys, brother. It's about being the person who shows up when people are at their worst and helps them get through it. Sometimes that means arresting someone. Sometimes it means calling an ambulance. Sometimes it means just treating people with dignity, even when they don't deserve it. Especially when they don't deserve it. Patricia Sanchez watched this exchange with amazement. She'd been on the force for 15 years, had seen celebrities and athletes throw tantrums over simple traffic tickets. But here was Jon Jones in the rain, his fiancée being loaded into an ambulance, taking time to mentor a rookie who'd hassled him. "Mr. Jones," she interjected, "your fiancée is asking for you." Jon nodded, then did something that shocked both officers. He extended his hand to Michael. "Officer Torres, keep doing your job, keep stopping cars in storms, keep approaching situations with caution, but also keep that humanity I saw when you called the ambulance. That's what's going to make you a great cop." Michael shook the offered hand, feeling the power in Jon's grip, but also the restraint. "Thank you, Mr. Jones, and I hope your fiancée is okay." Jon was already moving toward the ambulance. "Hey, Officer Torres," he called back. "You want some advice from someone who learned the hard way? End every shift by asking yourself, did I make things better or worse today? If the answer is worse, figure out why and fix it tomorrow. If the answer is better, even a little bit, then you did your job." As the ambulance pulled away, lights flashing through the rain, Michael stood there processing what had just happened. Patricia walked over, shaking her head. "In 15 years, I've never seen anything like that. Do you understand what just happened?" Michael wasn't sure he did. "I hassled a celebrity and he was nice about it." Patricia laughed. "No, rookie. You just got a life lesson from someone who had every reason to make your night hell and chose to make you better instead. That man has been arrested more times than most criminals. He's been at the bottom, lost everything, and built himself back up. And instead of holding a grudge against cops, he just showed you grace," she continued. "I've arrested him before, you know. Years ago. DUI. He was a different person then. Angry, entitled, thought his fame made him untouchable. The fact that he stood in the rain, let you pat him down, called you sir, and then gave you advice. That's not just growth, that's transformation." Michael looked down at his hands, still wet from the rain. "I really thought he was just another rich, drunk driver." "And that's the lesson," Patricia said. "Every person we stop has a story. Some are exactly what we think. Others are having the worst day of their life, and some, like tonight, are just trying to help someone they love. The badge doesn't make us mind readers. It makes us responsible for figuring out the difference." They got back in their vehicles, but Michael couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. When he got back to the station to file his report, he found himself writing not just about the stop, but about what he'd learned. His sergeant, reading over the report, raised an eyebrow. "You want to include all this philosophy in an official report?" Michael nodded. "Yes, sir, I think it's important. I think it shows what kind of officer I want to be." The story could have ended there, but life has a way of bringing things full circle. 3 months later, Officer Michael Torres was working day shift when a call came in about a disturbance at a community center. When he arrived, he found a crowd gathered around 2 men who were clearly about to fight. One was drunk, aggressive, shouting about disrespect. The other was a teenager, scared but trying not to show it. The old Michael might have just arrested both, sorted it out later. But Jon Jones's words echoed in his mind. Did I make things better or worse today? Instead of escalating, Michael approached calmly. He separated the two, talked to witnesses, learned that the drunk man had been harassing kids at the community center and the teenager had stood up to him. Instead of arrests, Michael called the drunk man's family to pick him up, got him enrolled in a treatment program, and thanked the teenager for protecting the younger kids. As he was finishing up, he heard a familiar voice. "Officer Torres." "Good to see you again." Jon Jones was standing there with Jesse, both of them carrying boxes of sports equipment. They were donating gear to the community center, something they did regularly but without fanfare. "Mr. Jones, how's your fiancée doing?" Michael asked, genuinely pleased to see them. Jesse smiled. "Much better. They finally diagnosed the issue. I'm on treatment now. Thank you for calling that ambulance that night." Jon looked at how Michael had handled the situation, the drunk man being led away by family instead of in handcuffs, the teenager being treated like a hero instead of a troublemaker. "I see you took our conversation to heart," Jon said quietly. Michael nodded. "Every day. I ask myself your question every day. Today, I think I made things better." Jon smiled, the kind of genuine expression that transformed his intimidating features. "You know what? I think you did too." He paused, then added, "You know, we do youth programs here every week. Teach kids discipline, respect, how to channel aggression into something positive. Could always use officers who understand that arrest isn't always the answer." That's how Officer Michael Torres began volunteering at Jon Jones's youth program. Every Thursday, he'd show up in civilian clothes and help teach kids that police officers weren't the enemy, that strength wasn't about domination, and that everyone deserved a second chance. He watched Jon work with kids who reminded him of the champion's younger self, angry, lost, one bad decision away from ruining their lives. And he saw how Jon's story, his transformation, gave them hope. One evening, after a particularly good session where a troubled kid had finally opened up about his home life, Michael found himself sitting with Jon on the gym steps. "Can I ask you something?" Michael said. "That night in the rain, you could have made my life hell. Why didn't you?" Jon was quiet for a moment, watching the sun set over Albuquerque. "You know what I realized when I was at my lowest? When I was sitting in jail when I'd lost my title, when my family was ready to give up on me. I realized that every person who showed me grace when I didn't deserve it was planting a seed. Every cop who didn't throw the book at me, every judge who gave me another chance, every friend who didn't give up, they were all giving me opportunities to be better." He turned to Michael. "That night, you were just a young cop doing his job. But I saw myself in you, not the me now, but the me from before. All that aggression, that need to control, that assumption that power meant domination. I could have reinforced that. Could have been another story you told about asshole celebrities. Instead, I figured maybe I could plant a seed. Show you that. Real strength is restraint. Real power is lifting others up." Michael nodded slowly. "It worked. It really worked." Jon stood up, stretching his massive frame. "You know what the funny thing is? By showing you grace, I reinforced it in myself. Every time I choose patience over anger, understanding over judgment, I get a little stronger. Not physically, spiritually. And that's the kind of strength that matters when you're trying to be a better man than you were yesterday." As they walked back into the community center, Michael reflected on how a rainy night traffic stop had changed his entire approach to policing. He thought about all the people he'd encountered since then, all the situations where he'd chosen de-escalation over domination, understanding over assumption. He thought about the kids who saw him as Officer Mike, the cop who played basketball with them and listened to their problems instead of just another uniform to fear. "Hey, Jones," he called out as the champion was setting up for the next drill. "Thank you for that night, for all of this, for showing me what kind of cop I want to be." Jon just smiled and tossed him a pair of boxing gloves. "Thank me by paying it forward, brother. Every person you show grace to, every kid you inspire, every situation you make better instead of worse, that's your thanks. That's how we change the world. One interaction at a time." The lesson from that rainy night became the foundation of Officer Michael Torres's career. He went on to become a training officer himself, teaching rookies not just about law and procedure, but about humanity and grace. He'd tell them about the night he stopped Jon Jones, about how the most dangerous fighter in the world taught him that real strength was knowing when not to fight. He'd share how one conversation in the rain had shaped every decision he made, with a badge on. Years later, when Michael received the department's Community Service Award, Jon Jones was there in the audience. No cameras, no publicity, just one man supporting another who'd taken a moment of potential conflict and turned it into a lifetime of positive change. During his acceptance speech, Michael told the story one more time, ending with words that had become his personal motto. Every shift, ask yourself, did I make things better or worse today? Because we don't just enforce the law, we serve people, and sometimes serving means showing grace to someone who might just be having the worst day of their life. The applause was thunderous, but Michael's eyes found Jon in the crowd. The champion gave him a small nod, fighter to fighter, warrior to warrior. Two men who'd learned that the greatest battles aren't won with force, but with wisdom, patience, and the courage to be better than who you were yesterday. In a world that often celebrates aggression and dominance, they'd found strength in restraint, power in compassion, and victory in lifting others up. That's the real story of the night. Officer Michael Torres stopped Jon Jones in the rain. Not a story of confrontation or conflict, but a story of transformation and grace. A reminder that every interaction we have is an opportunity to plant seeds of change, that the people we meet at their worst might just be fighting battles we can't see, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is show someone the person they could become simply by being the person we've chosen to be. Because in the end, that's what both men learned that night. Jon Jones, once the epitome of wasted talent and self-destruction, had become a teacher of redemption. Officer Michael Torres, who could have become another cop hardened by assumptions and authority, instead became a bridge between law enforcement and community. Two lives intersected in a storm, and both emerged better for it. That's the power of grace, that's the strength of transformation, and that's why, years later, people still tell the story of the night when the world's most dangerous fighter taught a rookie cop the most important lesson of all. True strength isn't about what you can do to others, it's about what you can do for them.